Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to the webinar today. Apologize for being a couple minutes late. We were having some technical trouble, but we'll get started here in a second. It looks like a few people are still trickling in, but soon we'll show you what we're working on in PHQ. I can hear you guys. All right, I think we'll get started. Can someone in the chat, if you don't mind, tell me if you can see, currently I got a purchase order set up. I'm not sure which screen you're seeing. I'm showing SQL on one screen and purchase order set up on another screen. Hey, Derek. I see you raised your hand. Database screen. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Derek. I'll switch these over and then we'll get this show on the road. All right. So today's webinar is basically what we call proof of concept. The proof of concept that we're working on or going to show you guys today is for AIA billing format. We're adding that to ProjectHQ, and these are just a way for us to kind of show you our mock-up, show you guys where we're at, what we're thinking with the product as we're developing it, and then to get feedback or answer any questions you have on it. So my name is Mike West. I'm one of the PMs that are currently working on ProjectHQ. And like I said, AIA billings is the current focus that we have right now on my team. I guess you probably wouldn't be here if you don't know what AIA billing is, but let me just give you a brief summary of what an AIA billing is. There's different types. The AIA actually stands for American Institute of Architects, and they've set a standard kind of for the industry for the way certain progress billings are done. And one of the most common types of forms there is the G702 and the G703 form. So what we're doing with our PHQ feature is creating an input method, allowing that data to be captured. So in the end, a G702 type and a G703 type document can be created from PHQ. There's also the ability to do different types of templates. We're gonna have a template editor that I'll show you here in a second. But for most of our users, they're probably gonna use the default template. But before I get ahead of myself, let me kind of tell you a little bit about what the feature is going to look like, who the intended user is, and that type of information. So first off, we've already got AIAs in Foundation software. So if you've got a user who is a Foundation user, they're going to have very similar functionality to what we're adding. What we're adding to PHQ is more for those guys out in the field, project managers, any user that you don't really want in the accounting system. They're still going to be able to print the PDFs that allow them to have those forms and send those forms to customers or whatnot. They're going to be able to print those forms. But more or less, this is to separate the entry from Foundation to kind of protect that accounting system. Now, there's going to be a way to integrate those when we sync the data over, and I'll go through that also in a couple minutes. But that's why we're doing it. We've realized that there's a need for those people out in the field to be able to enter some AIA data, progress billing data, and then if the accounting team decides to pull that in, they'll have the ability to do that. So let me start off showing you this mockup. The mockup that I'm going to show you is a non-functional mockup. So this is what we're developing towards, but this isn't a finished product. So anything that I show you today kind of is subject to change. And of course, with your guys' feedback, if you have any strong thoughts or not, those will be considered, and that might also change the mockup. But basically what we're going to have is when we go into PHQ, you're going to select a project. If you're a current PHQ user, you're already familiar with that. And once you're on the project screen, over on the left-hand column, you're going to have a work management submenu item. And in there, you're going to have AIA worksheets. If you click that, that will take you to the AIA screen, which is the focus of today. Currently, we don't have anything set up. So the first step would be for a user to come in and say, okay, I want to create an AIA for this Kessler clinic. I'll say create AIA worksheet. And we're going to get kind of a general question form, I guess. The first thing you'll notice that's asking for is the section number. So the way we're using sections in PHQ for the AIAs is basically to allow you to create multiple schedule of values, multiple different contracts per job, per project. So one particular project might have 5 different AIAs. Those can all be indicated by a separate section number. All those numbers, all those billings will be kind of captured separately. So basic information here that's going to more or less show up on the cover sheet and some of the header information. So the user will go through, they'll populate these fields. As they progress through this, they're going to get to a section on retainage. So this is our first area that we're kind of deviating. We're trying to give a little more flexibility than what we offer in Foundation. So in Foundation, you basically just have a retainage percent. You enter that, and that's the default retainage that you can apply or clear. For PHQ, we're going to split it. We're going to allow the user to type in a retainage percent and a stored material retainage in case those differ. If they don't, same number can be entered in both. But another thing that we're doing is adding these rules that will apply or clear retainage at a certain value when something is met, and that something is the project's progress. So you can see on this first line, I've got automatically drop retainage for line items that are blank percent complete or greater to blank percent. Basically, that's saying if my project reaches 50% complete, drop the retainage, which might normally be 25%, down to 10%. Completely customizable. You can define that per project, per section. You don't have to use the custom rules. If your job is always going to be a certain percent until it's cleared, you can leave this screenshot and just enter the first 2 fields, the retainage and the stored material retainage percent. Next up, also definable by the project and the section, is the stored materials, how we want to handle that. Basically, the default setting, if it's enabled, is going to be to move any stored material into the previous completed column when a new application is created. The alternative to that is going to let the user manually move that, but that's defined before any applications are created. Then any application that is created kind of follows the rules here. That's the general setup. Once that's set up for at least one section within the project, when you go to this AIA worksheet screen, you're going to have kind of the overview of what's going on with that particular AIA. If you had created multiple sections, it can be switched to using the section dropdown. Again, a non-functional mockup, so I can't show you that. But in that dropdown would be section 2, section 3. If I wanted to create a new section, there'd also be a way to do that from that dropdown. On this screen, we basically got a summary of all the stuff we just entered on that prior screen. So the address information, the customer information, if there's any signature information we captured, that's available, as well as the retainage rules that we just defined. After that, you're probably going to want to set up the AIA. So that's going to be handled on the application screen. So if we click into applications here, again, setting it up for the first time, so nothing's here. So I can hit create application. It's going to ask me for the application number. Now, we're going to default to a numeric system, but we do realize that some users use alphanumeric. If you do that, you can type in an alphanumeric number here. We won't be able to populate the number if you do that for that particular project section. But if you entered 4 previously, the next one would auto-generate the 5. But again, you can change that in case you had to reissue an application or something along those lines. Now we're actually on the application creation page. So from here, we can either add titles, add line items, or add subtotals. We can also add change orders. So first off, though, we need to define what date range this application is for. So at the top, you'll notice that there's the application date, due date, billing from, billing to, very similar to fields that we have in Foundation. User will be able to have our standard date picker, pick the date, fill those out. And from here, there's 2 methods to adding a line. Obviously, if there's no lines, we can kind of give you a visual kind of in the center of the screen. After lines have been created, there's also these buttons down here. For this example, I'm just going to hit add title. And a line appears. I can type anything I want into that line and then press enter to save it. So now that line's on the AIA. And basically, that's what we're going to do. We're going to add line items, add titles. When I add a line item, it's going to ask for a little more information than a title does. It's going to ask for the AIA item number, the description, the schedule of value for that particular line item. And then these phase and cost codes, it's on in the mockup. It may not be on for every one of our users. This is going to be driven by the Foundation control file that indicates whether you job cost your income. If you are job costing your income, of course, we need to capture that information. If not, these fields wouldn't even show up for that type of user. We can also indicate whether or not a particular line item should use the default retainage or the retainage rules that we talked about just a couple minutes ago. If you choose to do that, you leave this checkbox checked, turn it off if not. Again, that's driven line by line. Once all this information is filled in, the user could hit save and new, and then they wouldn't be taken, the screen wouldn't change more or less. It's just these form fields would get cleared out so that they could quickly, easily add the next line item as you're populating the schedule values. If you've added the last one for now, you could hit save and done. And then you'll kind of drop back to this edit screen. I'm going to add a subtotal here just to progress the mockup, but you can see, don't pay much attention to the line items. They appear to be duplicated, but you could add multiple line items and then you could add a subtotal, and the subtotal is going to add up the things above the subtotal to the next title. So in this case, the 2 lines above it. On this screen, this is the edit screen. So this is where a user is going to be able to enter any information about the application. So the complete of this period would be available here, the % complete. Again, just like Foundation, we're going to let the user pick and choose what fields they enter. Some of the fields are going to be protected. Obviously, like the schedule value, you won't be able to click in there and change. You will be able to alter it on the application you've added it, but after that application has come and gone, you're really going to come in here and you're going to update the progress. So if they want to type in a %, they could do that. If they want to type in a dollar value, they can do that. Mockup here kind of has those columns switched, but you kind of get the idea there. We can scroll over. There's some more data. We've tried to be mindful of the real estate here. There's a lot of data with these AIAs, so we've tried to load up the left-hand side with some of the more important information. And then, of course, based on your screen resolution, you may see a little bit more or less, but that's kind of where we're going with this entry form. Once the data for a particular period has been entered, the user could click Save. They'll be taken back to kind of the application overview screen. From this screen, if you had multiple applications existing for this billing, you could hit the drop down and you could switch between those. And of course, if you wanted to, you could also switch the section. If you're on the most recent application, that's the one that will default to when you come into the screen. You'll be able to do things such as roll the application back, create a new application, print the application, and so forth. This screen also is going to have left to right functionality for seeing all the data that's on there. And you may have picked up on the last screen and on this screen, we're trying to give kind of a high-level overview of the status of the billing. So we're going to have the contract value, the current applications total, any retainage that's being held, and the total amount for any prior applications, just to kind of give a high-level overview to someone that just wants to glance to see where everything is. Again, proof of concept, so I don't have all the fields and all the forms to show you, but hopefully that gives you a high-level overview of what we're looking for here. Once the data for an application has been entered, the user would be able to print out or save as a PDF the billing and in one of those formats. So one of the formats I started with when we started the webinar was the G702. So just as a reminder, that would look something like this. And this will be one of our default templates that we load into the system when you get it. So there's the cover sheet and then the G703, which would have the line detail. This is going to mirror the setup, the layout that we've defined when we built that application in PHQ. We're also going to offer the G702 CMA G703 variant, and that just changes up the cover sheet a bit, changes the header as well. And then there's some situations where people are not going to need the whole G702, 703 layout. They might just need a simple progress billing, and we're also going to include kind of a default template for this as well. So 3 templates off the bat, but if those templates don't suit your needs, we're also going to include a template editor. And that's very similar if you're a current PHQ user to our existing custom template creators. So I, again, don't have anything built for this just yet because we're still in development, but the purchase order setup screen is a good reference for this. So a user will be able to come in here. They'll be able to import an existing Word document if one already exists that you want to kind of make into your progress billing template. And over on the left will be all the fields that we've gathered from a particular AIA. So you're going to have retainage percent, schedule values. You're going to have the ability to print the actual line items. Those are called merge blocks. There's way too many fields to list, but we'll try and include anything that we use to build those 3 default templates will be available to users to create their own custom templates as well. After all that's done, the main part of the billing, of course, is to get it over to accounting and process the billing. So one of the ways to do that, if you're a non-foundation user, would be to use the export templates like I've shown you, get those over to the accounting system and they can enter it. For our foundation users, we're going to try and make it as easy as possible. So when they're on the AIA screen here, there's this arrow button that's pointing left and right. That button is going to initiate a sync. And you can kind of imagine this is probably going to be the trickiest part for us to develop. And we have to put up some boundaries so that we don't get conflicting data and that everything works smoothly. So there's a couple scenarios here. Preferably, a company will define a process and decide whether or not they want to use PHQ for their AIA entry for a particular project, or if they want to use Foundation. If they make a clear separation like that, things are going to go super smooth. If you're creating an AIA in PHQ and then you try and send it over to Foundation and there's no existing AIA data for that, it will just allow it to go through and everything is fine. Now on the Foundation side, someone from the accounting team would have to go into Foundation software, and we're adding a AIA import on that side of things. And basically it would say, okay, you have an outstanding application. Do you want to pull this in? Since there are no conflicts, it would pull it in just like someone had manually entered it. And then the accounting team can post it and it would go through into the AR aging report and all the associated stuff that happens there with the GL account and whatnot. Same thing as if I had already started entering a billing in Foundation and I want to bring it over into PHQ, we can go that way too. Basically, it would do a check and say, okay, is there existing data for AIAs for this project in PHQ? If there isn't, it would pull over all the existing applications, all your schedule values would be there, all your percent completes would be there. And then the PM or whoever's handling the AIAs in ProjectHQ could continue with the next application in PHQ. Now, when we're doing these syncs, either way, we're checking to make sure some data is accurate before we continue. So we always want to make sure that we're not overwriting an application number. So if we're sending from PHQ into Foundation, we're going to check to make sure that that application number isn't already in use. We're going to check to make sure that the number of line items is accurate. We're going to check to make sure the schedule of value is accurate, so forth and so on. So we're doing a lot of kind of checks behind the scene before we even let that transfer occur. Now, if PHQ identifies that there's some sort of conflict, it's going to stop the user. It's going to say, hey, wait a minute, Foundation doesn't match PHQ. And your options are going to be work with your accounting team to get that corrected and try again. Or the user could elect to basically drop what's in PHQ and pull over all that data from Foundation as the source of truth, and again, continue on from there. So a couple options in that regard. If we're pulling data from PHQ into Foundation and we've determined that there's a conflict, perhaps the data was sent over to Foundation a couple days ago, and then now a user has gone in and they made a change to an AIA in the Foundation software. When that Foundation import fires off, it's also going to check for conflicts. And if there's any conflicts caught at that time, it will present the Foundation user with a screen that basically tries to resolve the situation. So it'll say, your PHQ has this information, your Foundation AIA has this information, which of the two do you want to use? And if they pick the PHQ information, then of course PHQ would continue to be in agreement and new applications would be able to go smoothly. If for some reason they've decided to go with what information is in Foundation, the way we've got it built is the next time that application is sent to Foundation, there's going to be some warnings. We're doing our best to try and make that as smooth of a process as possible, but like I said, the best user experience is going to be kind of deciding up front, okay, this project is going to be ran through PHQ, or this project is going to be ran through Foundation. That will completely remove the chance of those conflicts. But if conflict does come up, we'll kind of take care of it as best as we can, or involve the user where needed to kind of get them through that. That's pretty much it. We just want to give you guys kind of an overview, just a taste, a preview of what we're working on, and I think this kind of satisfies that. I did want to open this up to some questions before we close today, though. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, or send them through the question form there, and then I'll go through them and answer them as they come in. Okay, so one of the questions I got here is from James. James, you asked, are you able to have line items with no retainage and others with the entered percent? School projects do not hold retainage on labor. So yes, you'd be able to do that. When we added a line item on the AIA, one of the fields was to use default retainage or not. So in that situation, you would just turn the labor lines off from using retainage. If for some reason that was forgotten, you can also, when you're doing this entry, you can uncheck the use retainage box on the schedule value itself, and then it will stop holding retainage on that line. So if you caught that on the first application, you should be in good shape. I got a question here from Derek. Derek, thanks for your questions. One of your comments here was that the cost code and phase should show the numbers and the descriptions. That's probably just like an artifact of this mock-up. Our dropdowns should be consistent with the way they are elsewhere in PHQ, which would include both identifiers. Roseanne, you sent a question. You said, does the application total mean total for the application? That's actually a change that we recently made in development, we were talking about it, and application total isn't very clear. So we changed that title to read billing total. That's the amount that the particular application is more or less billing to the customer. But yeah, we identified that wasn't very clear during our development, so we've changed that. You also asked, will it tell you where the conflict is or just where that there is a conflict? So when we're importing, we're going to have different things going on. If we're importing in the foundation, it's going to be really hard for us to show the PHQ user where the conflict is. So that's where a generic message would come up and say, hey, you've got two options. You can pull that data from foundation and kind of set yourself at the beginning again, using what is already in foundation, or you can kind of work it out with the accounting staff. Now, if we flip it and we're pulling into foundation, if there's a conflict on that side, that's going to be very clear because we have both sets of data available to us. There will be a screen that basically shows on the left-hand side, this is subject to change, but on the left-hand side, it would show like what the foundation thing is. On the right-hand side, it would say this is what the foundation data is. Which one of the two do you want to move forward with? Derek, thanks for your suggestions. I see you asked, when do you expect it? Again, subject to change. There's a lot of moving parts with this development, and also as a company as a whole, where we kind of have to move resources from time to time. Currently, we're looking at Q4. Sometime August, September is what we're looking at right now. The complexity here is less so the web part, which is what my team is directly involved with. The more complex part is the foundation software side. So it's a separate team working on that. And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to allow our data to come in. So I expect if there is some sort of delay, it would come from there, but we've already got the team working on it. And our tentative goal is August, September of this year. So another question was, sometimes the general rejects the billing after it's submitted. What's the process for correcting one or rolling back? So I don't have a way to show you this in the mock-up, but when you're on the application screen, when you're reviewing, it would be, bear with me as I get to the right slide. When you're on this screen, by default, this is going to show you your most recent application. You could go back, so you'd hit this drop down and you'd go to application. Say you're on application 10 and you had to roll back to application 9. You'd click the drop down, you'd select application 9. The edit button wouldn't be functional because that's no longer the current application. But under this actions drop down, there would be a rollback option, and that rollback would clearly tell the user, okay, if you're going to roll this back, any application, you're rolling back to application 9, so anything that came after it, in this case 10, is going to be discarded. You can't undo this. Are you sure you want to do it? And then basically you'd be dropped off on application 9 where you could enter your new information. Another question, this one's regarding retainage. So Roseanne asked, if at the end of the job we reduce to a smaller percentage of retainage, do we adjust on that project setup page each time retainage is reduced? So you could do it there. So you could go back to the general screen and reset that rule. But the way we kind of had it in mind was basically on this screen, as long as you've defined what your rules are, so say you know up front that your retainage is going to be 10%, and then at a certain percentage it's going to drop to 5%. If you set up those custom rules, it will handle that for you. If for some reason a particular line item deviates from that, you would still have the use retainage checkbox checked. But some of these fields, it's hard to see in this mock-up, but some of these fields would allow you to actually enter the values yourself. So if you wanted to put in like 5%, it would calculate what 5% was for that particular application. A couple more questions here. So next question is, we use unit price bids for AIA creation because we bill by quantity and never by percent. Will this be available for pulling over to HQ? So we're going to have something in there that allows us to pull the budget, the job budget, into the AIA to kind of give you a scaffolding of the schedule of values when you start a project, if your budget kind of reflects how you would bill for something. Other than that, it's not going to pull over like the quantities or anything from any other area of PHQ at this time. It's something we might expand into, but I don't want to speak out of turn right now. We're just looking at the dollar values for that. Derek asked, are there notifications that are sent from the field to the office showing that a new AIA application is complete? How will they know that they need to go to pull in a new AIA? I'm not, the best way for me to answer this is what I do know that we're doing in Foundation. As I said before, that's a different team, so I can definitely pull this information over to that team to kind of give them the suggestion. But what they're doing currently is if a user goes into Foundation and tries to modify an AIA and data has been sent from PHQ for that AIA that they're looking at, it's going to block them from making changes in Foundation until they resolve the situation. So it's going to say, hey, you're looking at an AIA that has newer data that's been sent from PHQ over to you. Do you want to import that data? And at that time, it would take them in there right away to process that import, or they can elect to discard it. Maybe for some reason, the company has decided that that particular AIA isn't useful anymore. The application could be discarded and they could continue to move forward in Foundation. At this time, we're not like going to have a pop-up or anything that shows up when they're in time cards that says, hey, an AIA has come in. The phase one of this, I would say you'd probably want to get into some sort of process where at the end of the month, the AIAs are sent over from PHQ, and then the Foundation team knows that, okay, the first week of the next month, I need to pull these in. But that's a good idea. I can suggest that. I just don't know what notification systems are available on the Foundation side of things. Will the change orders and purchase orders sync to AIA like they do in Foundation? So that's on our roadmap. It won't be part of phase one of this project, but we do have a roadmap for PHQ that we're working with our management team to develop. And I did see on there that they want to have change orders and purchase orders flow through PHQ a little bit more in depth, I guess. And one of those areas that they would affect would be AIA. Will there be a report showing previous AIAs? Will it show what has been paid versus unpaid? At the initial launch, no. From the scope that we're working off of right now, that information would be available in the Foundation accounting system. And that's kind of where we would want to track whether something has been paid versus unpaid. We did talk about implementing something like that in PHQ, but that kind of opens us up to a lot of billing information, which we don't have a precedence for right now. So at least on phase one, there would be no indicator whether or not something was paid or unpaid. Roseanne asked, can you import a schedule of value into PHQ? Currently, no. Basically, the extent of the import into PHQ would be pulling from the existing budget in PHQ or importing from Foundation. So if someone had set up a schedule of value in Foundation, you'd be able to pull that forward into PHQ. But other than that, there isn't anything planned. I'm wondering if you could just shoot me another comment if you would like import that off of a CSV or off an Excel file, just to give me some more thoughts there that we can use. Derek said we need quantities as well for dot billings, etc. So when you guys are referencing the quantities, is that a different field than what's going to be available here? I'm assuming what you're talking about is like you have, say, 500 miles that you need to enter, and you want to enter like, okay, I've completed 250 miles. Gotcha. Yeah, Derek says in Foundation, it's unit price AIA billings. Yeah, we're basically trying to match what information is in Foundation on those AIA screens. I'll have to do a double check after this to see what we've got in there versus unit prices and quantities. If it's on the standard AIA form in Foundation, we should be able to do something, but let me take a look at that a little bit closer after this call, and we'll figure out what we can do there. Julie and Roseanne got back saying that schedule values from third parties like GC Pay or Procore, and then Roseanne said from Excel would be huge. Okay, that's good feedback. We're trying to take an iterative approach with some of this development stuff. So all these things that you guys are suggesting, I can't tell you for certain that we would implement them, but after we put the first product out, we're always open to feedback. And if it seems like it would help a lot of our clients, it's something we would definitely consider. Looks like the questions are slowing down a bit here. Let's go. I'll stick around for like 5 more minutes, and if I don't have any more questions, then I'll close the call. So if you have any more questions kind of bouncing around, make sure you send them in. So Derek sent in, how are permissions going to be handled? We recently implemented granular security in PHQ. So AIAs is going to follow that pattern. There will be an area in granular security where you can select AIA for certain users. And if they have that, they'll be able to access this. If not, they won't even see it. Another question, can the printed form of the AIA be emailed to the GC from PHQ? So initially in phase 1, we're basically going to offer the PDF, and then if the user would like to export that to their email client, they can. we did think about adding that ability as part of phase 1, but elected not to, just in the shortness of time to get the minimal viable product out. But it is something that we'll consider in the future. I know some of the other screens within PHQ allow you to email directly, so that would be something that would be probably higher on our list eventually. All right, everybody. I think that's it for today's webinar. I want to thank you for spending some time with us, trying to get a preview of this upcoming feature. I think we had a lot of good questions and some good feedback today. So I'll consider some of that stuff and see if and where we can fit that in. But again, appreciate the feedback, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks.